was enough for, time for them to read those comments, they may do the effective date starting the new 30-day effective date starting on November 26th. That has yet to be determined, but that 30 days is written into law. The APA also requires that the state has to provide a response in writing to those comments that raised legal challenges during this time period. So every comment, so for example, the ACLU of Virginia, when we submitted our comments about the model policies, we alleged various places where we felt the comments, the policies, the model policies were contrary to state law. They will now have to spend in those 30 days their time writing a response to the allegations that we made, alleging that there are legal violations. And any other entity, group, or individual that alleged legal violations is owed a written response under the APA. So that's why there's those extra 30 days. Now, they may do some sort of canned written response where they send the same blanket written response to everybody. But that's what that 30 days is supposed to be for them to respond to those written, to those allegations. And we don't know, we have not gotten a written response yet from the ACLU, so we don't know what that's going to look like yet. And frankly, we know a lot. We know, for example, there were various law professors throughout Virginia that submitted legal concerns. There were other legal organizations nationally that submitted comments expressing legal concerns. So we do know that there would be a number of responses the Department of Education would have to issue, theoretically addressing the legal concerns laid out by various organizations and individuals alleging that the proposed model policies violate existing state law. So I would not be surprised, and this is me speculating, I would not be surprised if this 30-day time period, let's say that we're in the current 30-day time period and November 26th is the end of that, I wouldn't be surprised if that gets pushed back just because of the amount of work that they have to do in that time, right? They have to review these 71,000 comments, they have to respond to these legal allegations, and there's going to be a lot of work that they have to do. So based on that, and again, coming up against the Thanksgiving holidays, it wouldn't surprise me terribly if they extend that period. They wouldn't necessarily have to, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did. So at some point after that time, VDOE will announce the new policies and the new effective date. What's tricky is that even if they significantly change the policies, the new set of proposed policies, they are not required to have another comment period, right? So they could theoretically come back with an entire new set of proposed model policies, but they don't have to have another public comment period. They just had this one. There's no requirement that they come back to the table again and let people re-comment again. So that was kind of the one-shot deal for public comment. So when they release their new policies, whatever those look like, and again, they may be some variation of what they currently have proposed. They may roll some of it back. They may keep all of it. There may be some that they roll back and some that they keep. It may look entirely different, and it's really hard for us to speculate what it might look like, but that doesn't have to go back up again for public comment. So once it's done it once, that's it. They don't have to go back before it again. So what is interesting is that, so Virginia state law, the one that authorizes the Department of Education to do this, to develop these model policies, they require that each school board shall adopt policies that are consistent with, but may be more comprehensive than the model policies developed by VDOE. Now, there is some real gray area here, and I think this is where we're going to see a lot of legal challenges and some real legal questions, right? Is what is considered to be more comprehensive than. If a school district decides to keep their 2021 model policies, which were certainly much more comprehensive than the 2022 model policies, can that be said to be more comprehensive than the 2022 policies, in which case the school district could say that they were in compliance with the state law? And so I think we're going to see that be one of the interesting angles and hooks that might be up for debate and up for legal argument as we move forward. We know that there are multiple school districts throughout the state that have affirmatively said they will not adopt these policies. We don't know what will happen to these districts, these school districts. I think there are two potential options that might happen that could go forward. One, I think I guess three options. One, they may be fine, that nothing may happen to them at all. And that would be best case scenario, right? That they go forward, they continue to implement inclusive policies and they are good to go. That would be best case scenario. Two is they may face lawsuits from parents or teachers who say that they are aggrieved by the school district's failure to implement the new Youngkin model policies for some reason, right? And the school district would have to defend against those lawsuits. And the third possible option, and this would be a little bit more of a stretch, and we don't know how they could do this, but it's possible that they may figure out some angle, is that the school district could face some sort of a budget cut or some sort of enforcement action from the state. And we think that's really unlikely, but there's been some veiled threats from the state to school districts about how they have to obey the law. So, there may be some creative thinking that the state does to try and figure out a way to enforce this, which we could see play out in the courts. So those are what we're watching really closely. I can tell you that, at the ACLU of Virginia, we are on standby. We've been in close communication with school boards throughout the state, the ones that have decided not to implement the policies. We are prepared to jump in and intervene as necessary if they need folks to intervene in those lawsuits to help defend them. Each district, unfortunately, has to make a choice about whether or not to a calculated risk to enter or not into those lawsuits, or to defend the policies. I also want to flag that we are currently working with Lambda Legal to potentially challenge the model policies themselves as being contrary to the underlying authorizing law. But the mechanics of us being able to do this are really tricky. And that's due to some complicated legal issues about who has standing to sue to challenge these state laws. So we need to find a plaintiff or plaintiffs with a very specific facts. And so one of the things I'm going to ask y'all today to do is I'm going to tell you what we're looking for. And I'm going to ask if you are one of these people that has had this happen to you, or if you know someone, to please reach out to us. We are looking for someone who was previously able to use the bathroom, consistent with their gender identity, who had their names and pronouns respected, who was allowed to play sports, all of these things. But now, because of the proposed model policies that are pending, have been told by someone, not because the district has changed its mind, but because even like a school administrator or anyone has told them that they cannot. So, for example, let's say a student last year was allowed to use, a trans student was allowed to use the restroom, with consistent with their gender identity. But this year, when they tried to use the restroom consistent with their gender identity, the principal said, according to the new proposed model policies, you can't do that, so I'm not going to let you do it now, right? Even if the district hasn't changed their policy. Those are the types of facts that we're looking for. And so if you know of someone that is experiencing these facts, again, having to do with their name, they were, their name and pronouns were being used, but now they're not because, the school is not, or the teacher or a specific teacher or an administrator is saying, because these policies are pending, we're not going to use or respect your name or pronouns. Please send them to us. Again, we're looking for very specific facts. I know that's complicated. And we're kind of weaving through a very difficult legal area to try and get us to be able to challenge this law. But if you know of folks that have those facts, please have them reach out to the ACLU of Virginia. Our intake email is intake@acluva.org, and I will share that in the chat. Again, it's intake@acluva.org. We are running social media posts with the same information. So if you follow the ACLU of Virginia on social media, you will see announcements about this. Again, we will continue to work with our partners like Equality Virginia and Pride Liberation Project and others like Side by Side and everyone else to hopefully get and support folks on the ground. I know this is an incredibly scary time. And I know it feels like there should be more that we can do to stop something as insidious as this from being put into place. And I promise there are multiple organizations working very hard to think through legal and advocacy strategies to combat this. But your role is the most important here. You are the ones on the ground, the parents, the constituents. Your voices matter the most. You guys keep calling and writing and showing up at meetings and telling your story and sharing your information. And, my biggest hope is that that is what gets the change that we need to see. And I'm just, again, very grateful and thankful for the incredible opportunity that you all have had, or that you, for inviting me here today, but also that you all have done in order to already push back against these horrible policies. So thanks. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it now to Ranger to speak.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Ranger. I use they, them, and he, him pronouns interchangeably, and I'm an organizer with the Pride Liberation Project. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being here. When the model transgender policies came out, I was terrified. I am a transgender student, and although I'm lucky enough I do not have to worry about my parents' approval. I know that as I read through the document and then asked a friend to read through the document because I was confused, I realized that these policies would hurt my friends. I realized that they would send people I cared about to unsupportive homes where their deepest secret had just been revealed. I realized that the policies that I had relied on in the past, I didn't even know had existed. Obviously, as a trans student of public Virginia high school, my experience wasn't perfect, but as I realized what the previous model policies had done for me without my even knowing about them, I also realized what the new policies would do to hurt us. That Friday night, I began mobilizing. That's what brought me to the Pride Liberation Project. As I would soon come to realize, the Pride Liberation Project is a student-led queer rights and queer advancement organization. We started in Fairfax County when our founders decided that the best way to make FCPS more equitable for queer students was to personally explain to our school board exactly how to do it. Later, we'd protest against the appointment of the new FCPS superintendent, whose actions in her previous school district made us worry that she wouldn't be qualified to lead FCPS. That organizing work was our first step towards a major shift. Instead of focusing on a one-time set of policy recommendations, the PLP grew into a statewide organization that focused on the advancement of queer students across Virginia. Our organizing work grew, and we created new county-specific chapters, of which we now have 12, but we're working on 13. But as our organization grew, so did our concerns. As I've mentioned, on Friday, September 16th, the new model policies dropped, and we began to take action. By that night, we had already created the bare bones of what the plan was for the September 27th walkouts. Our organizers were finding chapter leads who would oversee whole counties, and those chapter leads were finding walkout leads at each school. The time between the 16th and the 27th was a time of crunch, of desperately texting everyone we knew, and of ignoring a little bit of schoolwork in the name of asking friends to come to our walkouts. We ended up gathering more than 12,000 students in high schools across Virginia. We had major news organizations at a few of our walkouts. We created a public uproar, and we're incredibly proud of it. Then we started planning school board meetings across the state. Our main goal was simple: ask our local school boards to reject these guidelines. We've executed multiple school board meetings through this time, and we're planning on doing more. As well, in true high school student fashion, we submitted our public comment on the night that it was due. Additionally, our major upcoming work is in Richmond. On November 19th, we're asking high school students, college students, and supportive adults to show their opposition to these policies by joining us in Monroe Park. The Virginia Department of Education is attempting to pull off the largest rollback of queer student rights in Virginia history. If you're able to, and if you're supportive, we're asking you to fight for trans rights and to register for our rally at tinyurl.com/no-to-doe. That's tinyurl.com/no-to-doe. /no2do. At our Valley, we're planning on creating an art installation in Richmond to promote trans rights. Additionally, we're creating a Commonwealth-wide letter writing program, and we're planning on sending a few students to deliver those letters to the governor's mansion. Any student in Virginia is encouraged to write a letter, but especially queer and trans students. For any students on this call, I know that this is a terrifying time. I'm as terrified as all of us. It's unfair that politicians keep treating us as political pawns, and it's unfair that adults keep watching us do what we've been doing and saying that we'll save this state or this country or the world. But we're stronger than every single unfair thing that they've thrown at us. And whether it's fair or not, I'm helping to build a better future. And if you're on this call, I think I'd say I'd love to have you on my team. And for any adults on this call, thank you guys for being here. This shouldn't be the way that it is. And while I'm working to fix it, I could always use your help. Please join us in this fight. Again, I work with the Pride Liberation Project. We're working to create a better future for us and for queer students all across Virginia. Now I'm passing it back to Kaylee.
Thank you so much, Ranger. Thanks to Ranger and Eden for giving us more information and how everyone can get involved with both the ACLU and Pride Liberation Project. So now I will go into, well, before I do that, I was made aware that the chat box was not open at the beginning of the event. Our apologies, we did not realize that that was the case, but the chat box is now open. So if you'd like to post, comments or questions, although we encourage you to direct your questions to the Q&A box so that we're able to find them a little easier. So now we're going to go into our school board campaign, Equality Virginia's school board campaign. And like Narissa mentioned, and Eden as well, we were expecting, based on what the administration was saying, that the model policies as they were written in the draft would be released on October 27th, immediately after the public comment period ended. At least that's what we were going off of based on what the state was telling us. But then obviously we received the news that they're being delayed. And so now we're kind of in this in-between period, and we're not as sure of what the policies are going to end up looking like at the end of the 30-day period. And so what we were planning on at this particular event, sharing, the full set of information about our school board campaign. Unfortunately, we do have to wait until we get to see what the policies end up looking like in their final form before we can give everyone the most accurate information possible. So we're just going to go through, what we are going to be doing as soon as the policies are released. We have our framework and we're just waiting for the details, basically. So our school board campaign will be launching when the 2022 policies, those policies are officially released. And those, this campaign will include a variety of resources and ways to take action. And we'll go into, several different things that we'll be providing on the next slide. I do also want to point out or highlight that Equality Virginia, we do have some capacity to provide direct assistance tailored to specific school divisions. So if you feel like the fight in your particular school division is going to be really contentious, or it's going to be a key school division where you feel like you can change some hearts and minds and potentially prevent these new policies from getting passed. If you feel like that's you, please reach out to us to discuss, the context in your local area and any specific needs that you expect to be facing. We're looking to, we did a lot of work over the past year with Hanover County before these new policies dropped, and we're looking to, expand as these new policies come into effect. We're looking to expand that model of work that we were doing. So please reach out to us if you feel like we could be of direct assistance. So our school board campaign, when it launches, first and foremost, will include a school board hub webpage that will have all of the information that you might need to advocate on the school board level. This will be similar to what we did during the public comment period. We had a central webpage where folks could go and receive all the information they needed to make their public comment and learn more about the policy. And so we'll just be taking that page and morphing it into something a little more school board specific. We'll also have action pages. We're working on, we understand that it takes a lot of time sometimes to sit down and write, an email to your school board member in your own words, or folks might not be sure of what to say or what to include in an email, or if they're making a phone call, what to include in the phone call. So we're going to be providing, talking points, but we'll also have these action pages where you can go and type in your information, and it'll send an automated message to your school board members asking them not to adopt the new policy. We'll also have advocacy toolkits that folks can use as they're organizing in their local area. So as I mentioned, we'll have email templates, talking points, phone call scripts. We'll also have one-pagers for advocates that have, all the information that you need about the new policy in order to understand what it is, what it does. And we'll also have one-pagers that you can give to your school board members. If you're feeling like the school board members need a little more education about the policy and about the experiences of trans and non-binary students. So we'll have that you'll be able to provide to your school board members. We'll also have social media toolkits where you can share graphics that we'll have created for you, as well as captions and things like that, so that you'll be able to use social media and mobilize folks on the internet, online, around these particular issues or around this policy. And then last but not least, we'll also have trainings. And we've been, offering different versions of Advocacy 101 trainings, public comment trainings since June of this year. We pivoted and, kind of switched those up and made them a little more specific to the public comment period when that was going on. And we had 2 of those per week, whereas before we were having about 2 or 3 per month. We're deciding moving forward, as soon as we have all the information about the new policy and we're able to, include that in our training, we'll be starting those trainings back up, and they'll be once a week. So folks who are looking to show up on the school board level and give public comment or send emails or make phone calls, you'll be able to either come to a general Advocacy 101 training if you're new to advocacy and want to learn how to get involved, or to a public comment training if you want to specifically go to a school board meeting and give public comment. In terms of actions you can take right now, as we acknowledge, we're kind of in a waiting period. And so a lot of things that we were expecting to be asking you to do at this moment, we're going to ask you to wait until the new policy is dropped to kind of conserve our energy and jump on that strategic moment. But there are things that you can do right now in this moment. First and foremost, you can email your school board members and urge them not to consider or adopt the 2022 model policies. And this is both, in general, to not adopt them, but also specifically to not consider or adopt the new policy before it is officially published. Unfortunately, we have already seen at least one school board, Pittsylvania County, has considered and adopted the model policy, I believe even before the public comment period was over. and the policy is not official. So school board should not be doing that. So if folks could email school board members and remind them and urge them to not adopt the policy, certainly not now and hopefully not ever. That's the first and most important thing you could do. And then you can sign up for our Safe Schools Action Network. Once we are launching the campaign, we will be posting all of that information in an email and sending that to folks who are a part of our Safe Schools Action Network to receive more information when it launches. I believe someone will post the link to the intake form in the chat. So feel free to sign up and you'll be on our list to receive that information as soon as we have it available. And then lastly, you can, if you would like, donate to our Safe Schools campaign to help us provide support and resources to folks across the state. We're looking to have a youth advocacy day coming up in the General Assembly session, where we want to bring youth to Richmond. And we're, just wanting to support and send as much support out outside of Richmond to folks across the state in these school divisions. So, those funds will be used for, travel stipends for the Youth Advocacy Day, materials, if we're sending physical materials to folks that are organizing on the school board level, things like that. So if you'd like to do that, we also have a link that you can use to donate to that fund as well. And that is all that we have for you tonight in terms of this PowerPoint, but we have plenty of time left for questions. And we know folks likely have a lot of questions, so we've allotted the next 30 minutes to address those. Thank you so much for being here, everyone.
Thank you, Kylie. So folks, we've been collecting questions that you're asking in the Q&A and the chat. I know we have Ranger on here, Eden on here, and Equality of Virginia. So I'm going to ask the questions, and if folks want to, whoever wants to jump in and ask them, we can do that. And I'll try to direct the questions to the right folks if they may be more aligned with what you or your organizations does. Eden, you mentioned a little bit about some of the potential legal actions that could be underway. Missed the question I was going to ask. And so you mentioned a little bit about the legal stuff underway. Some folks had questions asking for clarification that, do school boards have the option to not adopt the policy? This person mentioned that they've told by their school board that they have to adopt the proposed policy, but we've obviously heard school districts like Arlington and Fairfax and Richmond say that they're not going to.
I just realized I was muted. Apologies. Yeah, this is a tough question, and I wish I had an easy answer for this. So there is no great answer here, and there's no real clear answer here. I think it's going to depend on how risk averse the school district is. Certainly a school district who chooses not to adopt the new proposed model policies is running a risk that they could be sued by both potentially a private plaintiff or organization like an Alliance Defending Freedom type organization. We know that there are those lawsuits already pending out there. Harrisonburg is being sued currently. Loudoun County is being sued currently by Alliance Defending Freedom. So we know that those are possibilities, right? They also run the risk of potentially having the state figure out a way to do some sort of enforcement action, right? So the school district is going to have to consider whether or not they are prepared to potentially pay the legal fees on the back end to defend their decision. And I think that's going to be a decision that every school district has to make on their own, right? And there's no real I can't say that there's a right or wrong decision here. I think, we've spoken with a number of school districts about their decision. To be completely candid, we were hoping potentially maybe one of the school districts might want to proactively sue the state because they actually have the clearest what's called standing. And standing is like in like the legal terms, standing is what you have to have in order to have the ability to sue proactively. And there's a court case in Virginia that actually says that school boards are the people that have the entity that has the standing to sue on the model policies. And so we were hoping that a school board, like an Arlington or a Richmond or Charlottesville, would sue the state about the model policies. But when we spoke with a lot of these districts, they've said, we're not going to proactively sue. What we will do is say that we're not going to implement them and wait for potentially, folks to come after us. And so they're making that calculated risk, right? That can't, every school board may not decide to make that calculated risk. I don't know that, I certainly there are going to be school boards that can't afford it and may say like, we can't afford to do that. And so we might not. Now, interestingly enough, I saw somebody ask about the, I believe the School Board Association's policy. And this may be an area where you could flip it back. We're in this like really weird twilight zone where the arguments that we didn't like last year, we might be wanting to use against us or vice versa. So like the legal arguments we were trying to like go against last year might be the ones we're using this year and vice versa. So it might be that we could argue, okay, well, don't pass the Youngkin 2022 model policies. Why not just pass the School Board Association policy, which is like, such a bare bones, don't discriminate policy and call it a day, which, again, is almost like path of least resistance in this situation because it's not as prescriptive and awful as what has been proposed by the Department of Education, right? And so in that sense, like maybe it's better that they do adopt something that's like bare bones and just says like we won't discriminate on the basis of gender identity. So I think, we're in such a weird place right now legally. And I think there are going to be just a wide variety of arguments coming out in different ways on how this starts to play out. And I think it's going to be, we already know there's about, 4 to 5 different lawsuits already pending in the state on a variety of issues before these policies even dropped. And so I think, all of these things are just going to be, watched and picked at, and we're going to have to watch the outcomes of them as things change. And the law on this is going to evolve quickly as we continue to, unfortunately, continue to litigate this.
Thank you.
Sorry, that was a long answer.
No, you're fine. I think you actually answered like 5 questions, so that's great. Ranger, a question for you and sort of, Pride Liberation Project and your friends out there. You all are a statewide organization. You have a network of students everywhere. What are you hearing from sort of your members and your friends who might, live in districts that might not, might be more rural Virginia, not sort of like the Nova or the Richmond where, the policies have been adopted. How do you feel this issue looks depending on, what part of the state students are in? And, how best can folks get plugged into what might be happening on the local level, understanding that, what works in Arlington is not necessarily what's going to work in Abingdon.
Yeah, absolutely. And we Absolutely. Our first concern, especially for students, but for everybody involved, is that you make sure that you're considering your communities and that you're keeping yourself safe. We don't want you out in at protesting at school board meetings or at our Richmond rally if it's not going to be safe for you. And so we are our advances look pretty similar across the state. Obviously, there's a lot more worry in a lot of school districts where the policies have not been rejected by their school boards yet. But we are still planning on moving forward in pretty similar ways just because of the relative, like, the policies are going to affect everybody everywhere that they're implemented in very similar ways, and so we're moving forward very similarly across the state.
Recording in
What's
progress.
best to do in those different areas? And a follow-up question that I was going to ask you is, if folks do live in a school district that may have already adopted the 2021 model policy, what can they do and how can they support those who live in districts that have not, or that they anticipate might be considering the 2022 policy?
So if you're in a more supportive district, then our main actions are going to be on the statewide level, trying to get the Virginia Department of Education to not implement these policies throughout the state, because if you already have that support at your school board level, then the rest of our work is going to be at this, or we can't exactly have you going to like other school board meetings for districts that aren't yours.
Awesome, thank you. Eden, I have a question for you. I know legislative sessions are going to be a doozy. We already know things are coming, and I think it's important to be mindful that we have an election year coming up next year in Virginia. And so anti-equality lawmakers are going to be introducing what they think is going to rile up their base. I think we're seeing from yesterday's election, it's not, transphobia is not a winning platform to run on. And so I speak for Equality Virginia, and we're going to use 100% of our capacity to stop the bad bills that are coming through. I think we all want to have moments of brightness where we can push for some proactive stuff. Is there any legislative action, that is possible or feasible in the upcoming session around the model policy?
Actually, Nursa, that would be a question I would probably want to ask you more. Yeah. I mean, I do think so. One big barrier I think we would have is the governor, right? Unfortunately, even if there was some potential for progressive legislation here, I think that we would have a potential veto from this governor. So I don't know. I feel like there might be a lot more in terms of defensive work than there will be in terms of affirmative work. I certainly, I know the legislators that brought this bill originally have been pretty outraged at the way this has been handled and manipulated by this administration. I think they feel like this was not what they intended when they passed this bill, and they feel like this has, basically been co-opted as a political football. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there was potentially some legislation that tried to help craft something that made it more clear what the intention of the legislation was. But I don't know. I don't know what the likelihood of that getting through and being signed is if it's, the administration's political football. They're not going to want to, they're not going to want to deflate that political football. So my guess is, I think, I would think that it's more likely that this is going to be a defensive session, that we're going to need to spend the bulk of our collective energy across our networks, trying to really kill some of the really bad bills that we know are coming. Bills that are trying to, ban gender affirming care, that type of thing that we think are going to, even though I think nobody knows, I think my assumption is everybody knows those aren't going anywhere in Virginia. I think a lot of folks are going to try and push these as messaging bills. And they're hurtful and they're painful for people, and they're a waste of time and energy. And and these are people's lives. And I just, it stinks that we have to actually go through this, but I do think that that's where probably the energy will be spent this session.
Yeah, for sure. And, that's not to say that EV doesn't have our proactive bills that we'll work on. I think definitely, I know a lot of folks have had questions around legislation, specifically around the model policy. And I think, we have concerns. So it's very easy for these bills to be hijacked and turned into something bad. And so I know we're really trying to focus on engaging folks at the school board level, obviously stopping any bad bills that are moving through, and where we have the chance to do proactive stuff, doing it, but understanding that, most of our efforts is going to be stopping the bad things. Okay, Kylie, I have some questions for you. When will the school board campaign website info be available, so we know when we can be ready to advocate with our local school board? And a few follow-up questions. What impact can someone have as a parent of a trans adult who is no longer in the school system? And are school board members elected or appointed?
So I'll answer the first question. The School Board Hub website, I don't think we've set a definitive date that it will be available yet. We're working with some folks that are very graciously helping us, get that set up, and get those action pages up for folks. It will definitely be before the 26th, November 26th, in anticipation of the policy dropping at that time. And then to the question about, how, sorry, could you repeat the second question?
Yes. So the second question was, what impact can someone have if they are the parent of someone who's no longer in the Virginia school system, but they still want to engage? And then are school board members elected or appointed?
Yes, thank you. So if you are a parent of a student that's no longer in the schools, you still have a story to share. We actually, had some folks join us at the Virginia Board of Education meeting on October 20th, and several of those parents had trans children that were no longer in the school district. So, you can still share your story, whether it be, on the state level, like at the VDOE meeting, or at the school board level. And obviously on the local level, your story will be even more impactful. And if you have the capacity, organizing your friends and your neighbors and your colleagues around the issue as well, and getting them to come out to the school board meetings with you. And then in terms of our school boards elected or appointed, I believe Eden typed an answer. Most are elected, but there are 16 that are still appointed in some fashion, whether that be all of the members. I believe when Williamsburg and James City County merged, the Williamsburg members are still appointed, but the James City County members are elected. And that actually that information is available on our school board tracker. I'll drop the link in the chat for that. But we track when meetings are happening, what's happening on agendas. There's contact information for, thank you, Marissa. And we have, the contact information for school board members. I believe if you scroll all the way to the bottom, that's where the information is about elected versus appointed.
Awesome. Thank you, Kylie. And some other questions we're receiving are, should folks be speaking to their local legislators too? It's always a great time to to contact your lawmakers and, express your support for trans and non-binary students. Always a good time for them to hear from constituents. We know legislative session is around the corner. 2 months from now, we'll all be, tracking bills and coming up with our plans. And so in the coming weeks, before lawmakers head back to Richmond, we'll be providing opportunities for you to go ahead and email them, expressing your support for the LGBTQ community and opposing any bills that, attack and target our community. And so Kylie, how do you suggest folks, and this is a question for anyone can answer this, feel free. How do you suggest folks connect with other advocates who might be in their district?
I would say, I'll just throw this out there. Getting in contact with us. We have, our Safe Schools Action Network list. If you're really having a hard time connecting with folks, we can get you connected with other folks on that list that are in your area. And, outside of that, just showing up to school board meetings. I mean, we've seen, especially in Hanover and several other school boards, folks will show up speaking on the same issue and they didn't know each other beforehand, and they'll make a connection at the meeting and then they'll continue organizing afterwards. So I would say those are the two ways that I would recommend, but want to leave room for other folks to answer too.
Yeah, I was going to say social media is where I've seen a lot of folks connect with each other, although I'm awful at it because I'm old. And I do think like people have connected from finding each other, like people, especially parents, of trans students have found each other and just networked from, knowing each other and then have built a community through that. And I think those have been some of our strongest communities. And they're so directly affected people that they can speak so personally to it that especially when they speak to school boards, it's just some of the most powerful testimony.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing, mostly reaching out to us, the Pride Liberation Project, or the ACLU VA, or Equality Virginia. We are good at social media, so you can reach us there because we're young.
Our social media person is young. I'm just not personally.
Makes sense, yeah. And our social media person is also very good. And so you can absolutely reach out to us or if you, honestly, for young people, the easiest way for us to get involved in this is going to be through our schools. That's just talk to your friends and say, hey, bro, y'all want to go to a school board meeting? That's what's fun. And so that's pretty much how I got involved. So it works for throughout the state, I think.
Awesome. And yeah, everyone here is great at social media. We'll just put it out there. But Pride Liberation especially. Eden, this is a question for you, and I think you sort of answered it. VDOE in previous years chose not, there was no enforcement mechanism with the original legislation that passed, and so school boards could not adopt the policy, and there was no way of sort of enforcing taking any action. Is there a legal question of selective enforcement of the state's laws since the policy was derived from legislative action?
It's the thing. I would argue that there is no enforcement mechanism of this law. I think it's pretty clear. And I think, the Northam administration's interpretation of that, I would argue, is the right interpretation. It's pretty clear in the law that there is no real, for better or for worse, there's no real teeth mechanism to enforce it. I will say, though, and this is, and I'm not saying this in like a partisan fashion, but we have seen this administration take things that are not enforceable and try to threaten enforceability. They did this with the masking. Y'all might remember back in January when Youngkin was sworn in, he passed a rash of executive orders right away. And one of them was the masking executive order, which allowed parents to opt out of masking. At that point, people were masking, still in classrooms, and it allowed parents to make the decision right off the bat not to wear masks, have their children not wear masks. And some school districts said they weren't going to, and this was before there was state legislation to match it, but some school districts basically said, we're not going to follow this executive order. And Youngkin and his lieutenant governor, and then also the AG, went on multiple media outlets and said, like, we will withhold funds from your school district if you don't follow our executive order. And there is no mechanism in the executive order to withhold funding. So they certainly have not used the lack of a enforcement mechanism to stop them from threats. So I don't know if they would actually do it or if they could do it. I certainly think that would be something that if I was a school district who got my funding cut, I would use that as my number one point in court to be like, they have no authority to do this. And I think that would be like the best grounds to argue like that this is like way beyond the authority of the governor or the administration to do. But I don't think that's going to stop them from potentially trying or potentially at least threatening. So, and I think that might be enough, a lot of these schools, because they, there's risks about their insurance carriers and this and that. I think that, some of the threats alone could be risky enough for them to not do it. So, I think they have to calculate all of those risks, and they get advice from their attorneys about what to do, and then they make this decision. And so all of those factors play in. And unfortunately, I think that's why you have some that are saying like, we're not gonna, make the decision to kind of stand up to it, which is really sad. But I do think that hearing from their constituents is a part of that calculus. And I think if they hear from their constituents enough that this is a problem, then I think that, certainly will weigh heavily in part of that calculation.
Awesome. Thank you, Eden. We have a few more questions folks have asked that I'm going to answer really quickly, and then we'll close out the meeting. We have a question wanting to ask if it will include deaf, hard of hearing, and disability community here in Virginia. In terms of EV events, on our end, we're going to do our absolute best to make sure that we have ASL interpretation for future events that we're doing. So anything related to the school board campaign, if we're having a live event, we will strive to make sure that ASL interpretation is included. I'm thinking this question might also be asking about school board meetings, and I don't believe a large amount of school board meetings have ASL interpretation provided by default. So unfortunately, at least from what I have seen in the school board meetings that I have been to, that's not provided, but I would recommend reaching out to the clerk of the board in the county or city where you live.
And I'm going to jump in here. If you make a request for an accommodation and you do not receive it, you should be reaching out to the Disability Law Center of Virginia and letting them know.
Yes. Thank you, Eden. We had a question about the VSBA, or the Virginia School Board Association guidance, and how that plays into the new policy. So when the 2021 policy came out, the Virginia School Board Association, created kind of their own version for school boards to adopt that was really watered down, and didn't really do what the the model policy intended to do. And we're still waiting to see when school boards are starting to consider the new policy, if they're going to make changes to the VSBA they adopted, because the VSBA policy package really only included very minor general language changes and then legal references. So it's going to be referencing the same code section with this new policy. So we'll just have to see what the VSBA releases. They usually don't share that information with us. We usually have to look for it on school board agendas. But as soon as we know that, we will be sharing that information with folks. And someone from HRC Greater Washington, D.C., is there a possibility for us to partner with you on these efforts? Absolutely. Reach out to myself or Narissa, and we can get something going. And then this might be a better question for you, Narissa, about the separate response to the sexually explicit content issue, and how that's going to play out.
Yeah, I know, a different model policy was introduced in this year. It's still this year. I keep forgetting we're still in 2022. And so, we are in discussion with some lawmakers to clean up certain sections of the code, so that model policy cannot be used. I'm not saying things very well tonight, but yes, we are having those conversations and happy to connect offline with folks.
Awesome. Thank you. That is all we have for everyone tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Eden and Ranger for being with us on this call. Hopefully folks got their questions answered and got, some information, as we wait through this waiting period, and we'll have more information for you in the coming weeks.